Hi, this is Chris Guest-Hewson from Aptis Tutor, and today we've got the version with B2 answers of Aptis for Teachers Speaking Practice Test 3. You'll see some of the language is highlighted. For explanations of this, go to the post in the link below. Hope you find it useful.
I'm going to ask you 3 short questions about yourself and your interests. You will have 30 seconds to reply to each question. Begin speaking when you hear this sound. What do you like about your job?
Well, the thing I've found most rewarding is working with teenagers and seeing how their characters develop over the years. I enjoy the challenge too, but I'd have to say that the real bonus is the holidays. Having a long summer break is fantastic, and I'm sure all my colleagues would agree that we need it.
What did you do in your last lesson?
I explained what false friends were, as we've been studying a lot of vocabulary recently, and a few examples had come up in class. So I told them about one of my own mistakes. I once said I was embarazada, not realizing it doesn't mean embarrassed in Spanish. It actually means pregnant.
Please tell me about a teacher that you didn't like when you were at school.
To tell the truth, I couldn't stand any of the teachers at secondary school. I always had the impression that they weren't interested in educating us. They were just intent on getting through the day. There was one teacher I especially despised, as he used to hit the kids with a belt. Just as well that's not allowed anymore.
In this part, I'm going to ask you to describe what is happening in a picture. Then I will ask you 2 questions about it. You will have 45 seconds for each response. Begin speaking when you hear this sound. Describe this picture.
There are 5 children sitting in a line and looking at mobile phones or gaming devices. They could be playing something like Free Fire. They're wearing old-fashioned costumes, which makes a strange contrast with the modern technology. One boy's dressed as an admiral, and the other looks as if he's from a royal court. 2 of the girls are in ankle-length dresses, and the third is in tartan. It might be a school uniform, so maybe they're in a school play. Perhaps it's a dress rehearsal.
What type of games do children in your country play?
Well, I'd say that video games are probably the most popular type nowadays, especially among older children. All my teenage students seem to be addicted to screens. But during the school break, you can still see children playing active games like football or skipping, and traditional games like hide and seek, hopscotch, and rock, scissors, paper, stone are still popular. Most younger kids also play make-believe games like teachers and students or doctors and nurses.
How have children's games changed in the last 50 years?
I think they've changed a lot in general, especially since I was a child. These days you hardly ever see children playing in the street, but we were always playing sporty games outside. The other main change is who they play with. At home, we used to play cards and board games with all the family together, but nowadays children often play online games alone in their rooms. Well, I say alone. In fact, they're usually connected with kids from all over the world, so that's different.
In this part, I'm going to ask you to compare two pictures, and I will then ask you two questions about them. You will have 45 seconds for each response. Begin speaking when you hear this sound. Tell me what you see in these two pictures.
Both pictures show women teaching, but the types of classes are very different. The first photo shows a typical primary classroom with quite a lot of students, whereas the second one looks like a one-to-one class with a tutor and a teenager or young adult. Maybe it's an adult education course. The tutor's sitting next to the student, giving her individual attention and probably helping with her writing, while the primary teacher's standing at an interactive whiteboard and talking to the whole class.
What would it be like to be a teacher in these two classes?
Teaching the large group would be more tiring because students nearly always have different educational needs. You'd need a tight lesson plan, as it may be too challenging for some and too easy for others. So you'd have to consider what extra activities you could give fast finishers. For a one-to-one tutor, it depends how well you get on with the student. If they're keen, friendly and hard-working, the time flies. But if they're bored, unfriendly and lazy, the lesson seems to last forever.
How important is it to keep class sizes small?
It's really important for several reasons. Firstly, there's more opportunity for student-teacher interaction in a small class. Interacting with the teacher can really help students feel better in class, especially younger learners who are new to school. What's more, having smaller classes allows us to concentrate more on the material we're teaching and less on classroom management. And with a large class, it's much harder to give students individual attention and keep track of their progress.
In this part, I'm going to show you a picture and ask you 3 questions. You will have 1 minute to think about your answers before you start speaking. You will have 2 minutes to answer all 3 questions. Begin speaking when you hear this sound. Look at the photograph. Tell me about a time when you observed or were observed by another teacher. How did you feel about it? How important is other colleagues' advice? You now have 1 minute to think about your answers. You can take note if you want. You now have 2 minutes to talk.
I clearly remember the first time I was observed. It was when I was doing the practical part of my teacher training course. The classroom was tiny and there were 20 students, the course tutor and 6 other trainees. Everyone had been really supportive throughout the course, which gave me some confidence. I'd spent ages preparing the class, even though I only had to do a 15-minute slot. But I was still so nervous that when I wrote on the board, My hand was shaking, I was sweating, and I nearly lost my voice. Luckily, it all went well in the end. It's very important to take notice of your colleagues' advice, especially when you're a novice teacher without much experience. I used to work in a school that had a mentoring scheme where they paired you up with an experienced teacher. You'd go and watch each other teach every fortnight and then meet straight after the class to discuss how the lesson had gone. She gave me lots of tips about lesson planning and classroom management, especially about how to deal with disruptive students. I'd had some problems with teenage classes when I started teaching, so that really helped. Now I try to pass her advice on to other new teachers. Hope you found that useful. For more details and lots more exercises, go to www.aptistutor.com. The link's below. Thanks.